So you're looking to travel to Europe. Maybe it's your first time planning a trip, maybe it's your first time being in Europe, but you're looking for advice and tips from people who have actually been there and traveled and done it. If this is the first time that we've met, my name is Emily here at Cinomadia Films, and today I'm here with my mom, who traveled with me to Europe last year for about a month. So we're going to be sharing things that we learned from the planning stage to the traveling stage, and even things that we wish we would have known ahead of time or would have done differently. So without further ado, let's get to it. So the first stage of any trip is planning it. And there are a couple different tools that we used in order to really buckle down, get the details in order so that we knew when we hit the ground, we could hit the ground running. The first thing that we used was just a general document on our laptop, and we just put in all the details that we might need, and we created several files that would be like our emergency contact page, our address page so we'd know where Airbnbs were, and other details like that. And then the second tool that we used is one that I highly recommend you using for any kind of travel plans, and that is Trello. Now, Trello has an app that you can use on your mobile devices as well as a desktop version, but it's just really helpful for being able to put in your itinerary, inspirational pictures of the location that you're traveling to, as well as travel details like your plane and your train tickets and different information that you might need while on the ground. So no matter what tool you use to plan out your trip, you just want to be sure that all of the major details are covered so that you don't end up in a big catastrophe.
Okay, so let's talk about lodging. It's important to evaluate what options you have. We looked at hotels, hostels, and Airbnbs. We wanted to focus on the culture, and so we chose the Airbnbs. We didn't focus on super high-end Airbnbs because we wanted to spend our time outdoors, and so it might cost somewhere between $50 to $100 a night, depending on your location. I would recommend that you book your Airbnb 3 to 6 months out to ensure that you get your location, because some of these areas will book rapidly. Look at the reviews on Airbnb. We stayed with a lot of superhosts who seem to offer the best experiences and have highest ratings.
We had a really great experience with almost all of the Airbnbs that we stayed at. There were a couple of them that were a little bit less than what we had hoped for, and in fact, one of them actually canceled on us very last minute. You can go back and watch that in the episode right before we got to Annecy. But we were able to find a second Airbnb within a matter of minutes, really, within an hour with the person canceling to our being able to find another one. So the Airbnb site is really easy to use, and it's really helpful in the case that you do get in a pinch like that. You can usually find a second one to replace one that cancels. One of the things that we did learn through that experience of having the host cancel on us last minute was to have a plan B. So you may not have to do this for every single place that you stay, but with Airbnbs, it's just nice to know that there are other locations nearby in the case that something happens. Another part of preparing for your trip is probably going to include what kind of things you want to do once you're on the ground in a country. When we were preparing for our trip, we decided to buy a couple different city passes because we knew we were going to be spending a few more days in places like Vienna or in Paris. So let's talk a little bit about that. In every city that we were in, we did research a city pass that would give us access to different things to do or the transportation within that city, but we ended up only purchasing 3. The first one was in Vienna, and this one I don't necessarily recommend you're getting unless you're planning on visiting a lot of the museums. The second one was the Salzburg Pass, and we highly recommend this one because there were so many different activities that the pass included, and we were able to get to a lot of them during the 3 days when we were there. So it's a very economical option for the things that the pass covers. The third pass that we got was in Paris. Now this one was not a city pass, it was a transportation pass that's called the Navigo Découverte Pass. And this allowed us to travel pretty much all over this city without having to pay additional fees, and it also made it much easier going through the metro system. So we do recommend that, especially if you're going to be staying in Paris over 3 days. One of the things to keep in mind, and partially why we didn't necessarily appreciate the Vienna pass as much as we appreciated other passes, is you simply cannot do everything that the pass gives you access to. So it doesn't matter if there's 60 different things that you can have free access to. If you can't get to it, then you may not actually be getting as good of a deal as you originally thought. So whether or not you get a pass, always keep in mind it takes longer to do things than you think it will. So our recommendation would be to focus on 2 big things per day. You might be able to fit in a few small things or visiting a special restaurant or things of that nature, but you want to plan on at max 2 big things per day. If you do anything more than that, you're probably going to find yourself really exhausted and not necessarily enjoying the things that you're seeing.
Though we traveled to many European cities, as mentioned, we chose to get city passes for only 2. For the rest of the cities, we used walking tours such as those by Rick Steves and guided city tours such as freetour.com and freetoursbyfoot.com, where you apply online for a specific day and time, meet with a group to tour, and tip your guide afterward. By the way, be sure to pack comfortable walking shoes for your adventure. Choose something practical and comfortable over cute and stylish. You'll be glad you did.
When planning your itinerary, you want to make sure that you build in time to just be, to take in the culture, to relax by a riverside, or to simply do a little bit of people watching. That's a very common thing in Europe. But you just want to be able to relax and enjoy traveling because it is a gift to be able to travel the world. But if you're constantly running like a mad person everywhere, you're not necessarily going to have the best experience. So try to plan in a little bit of time in your itinerary to just simply relax and be. Another rule of thumb is to try and plan for at least 2 nights per city, especially if it's a big city. Now, if you're staying somewhere like Vienna or Paris, we do recommend trying to stay at least 3 days, but potentially up to 5 days as well. Moving on to transportation. We chose to travel during shoulder season, which is basically non-peak season for tourism. Peak season being from around June through August. We went in September, so we were able to purchase our plane tickets only 3 months out. One of the tools that we found most helpful in finding cheap plane tickets was Skyscanner. And this app is just really easy to use, and you can set flags and reminders on different sets of plane tickets so that you can see if the price is going to drop at any point in time and when you should reserve them. If you are planning on traveling during peak season, then we do recommend that you buy your plane tickets a little bit earlier than we did, perhaps between 4 to 6 months out. We purchased economy tickets to and from Europe, but one of the things that we learned was that because it is a 7-hour flight, it might be more comfortable to sit in the emergency exit row. So if you're comfortable handling the emergency seat responsibility, then that may be the best option for you if you're looking for an economical seat, but one that's a little bit more comfortable with legroom.
If you're traveling in Europe, you will be traveling by train. We chose the U-Rail Pass, the Flex Pass, because it gave us the most options for our month-long trip in Europe. Now, U-Rail needs to step up their app because it is not user-friendly. However, Rome to Rio is the app that you will want to use to determine what trains, how to travel from point A to point B, how long it's going to take, etc. And be prepared, you could be seated both forward or backward as you travel in trains.
Another mode of transportation that we had was boat. And because we had the U-Rail passes, we were able to get a half tariff or a half ticket price on the CGN cruise that we had on Lake Geneva. So one of the other benefits with the U-Rail pass is that they offer additional discounts off of other things like the CGN cruise or additional city passes and so on. One note on the Flex Pass is that because you can choose the days that you're going to be traveling on, sometimes you might accidentally overbook or double book your tickets. For instance, when we were in Lucerne, we were already on an active U-Rail Pass day with the train because we were traveling to Lucerne. But then we ended up buying 2 additional tickets to be able to get to our Airbnb and back, and we realized we didn't need that after the fact. So be sure to watch out for double booking or double purchasing tickets when your U-Rail Pass already covers that transportation fee. For more information about the U-Rail passes and traveling by train in Europe, you can find information on the U-Rail website, and I'll be sure to link that in the description below. Of course, one of the things that we have to mention under transportation is making sure that you have a valid passport. It took them about 4 weeks to process our paperwork, but it can take up to 10 weeks, so be sure that you have plenty of time in which you can receive your passport before your trip. Also, something that we tried to do was our own passport photos, but they are so picky on how those photos are taken that we do recommend that you go have a professional person do it or a place that is certified to take passport pictures. Something else to keep in mind is that if your passport is going to expire within 6 months, sometimes a country will not let you inside their borders, or sometimes the United States won't let you back in. So you'll want to be sure that your passport is ready to go and it's going to be valid for past that 6-month mark. Also, for those of you that are worried about your passport picture not looking good, it just probably won't, so just plan on that ahead of time. There's a quote that I came across with the travel world that basically says, if you look anything like your passport photo, then you should travel more. So just keep a good spirit about it. When you're traveling, you'll want to be sure that your passport stays in a very accessible and yet secure location, because oftentimes you will need to pull it out with your train ticket or with your URail pass. So again, making sure that you can access it quickly is key, but also keeping it in a secure location because there are pickpockets and you could potentially lose it.
Moving on to insurance. We chose Allianz and we liked what they offered in their package. They are easy to work with and will answer whatever question you have. And they are accessible 24 hours a day, whether it's stateside or in Europe. You will have spent hours planning for your trip, but there could be some hiccups in the journey. So travel insurance is very important.
Moving on to luggage. Now, this is of course a really key part of traveling, making sure that you have the right stuff with you and that you have the proper luggage while you're traveling. We chose to just bring a carry-on and a backpack, and I really loved that combination. Now, some of you guys may be thinking, you did a month in Europe with only a carry-on and a backpack? What? But it's really a lot easier than you might think. In fact, we ended up having more clothes packed than we actually needed. So making sure that your Airbnb or once a week Airbnb has a washer and a dryer can be really helpful, because then of course you can do your clothes while you're at an Airbnb versus having to go pay for one outside of the Airbnb. When it comes to the luggage itself, because carry-ons come in a lot of different dimensions, you're going to want to make sure that whatever luggage piece you have as a carry-on specifically is going to match whatever the requirements are for the airline that you're flying on. We ended up flying with Norwegian to and from Europe, and we also flew with another one on the ground in Europe from Rome to Vienna, and that was Wizz Air. And they also had really tight restrictions on what kind of luggage and how heavy. But as far as Norwegian goes, they have a requirement with their luggage that it be about 22 inches tall, which is key to remember because not all luggage are made equally. And then also the weight restriction was 22 pounds. So you have to be smart about the way that you pack. One thing that we found that was really helpful is rolling your clothes. Lots of different backpackers and travelers will tell you the same thing. Roll your clothes and you'll be able to fit a lot more in. And you'll also be able to see what's in your luggage better than if you just stacked it on top of each other. A couple of resources that you might take a look at online are, for you girls, Travel Fashion Girl. She has a ton of different resources through articles as well as her own YouTube channel. Highly recommend going and seeing her resources. And then also for both guys and gals, you can look at the channel from the Vaga Brothers. They also have several tips and recommendations for things to pack while traveling. One of the limitations with having only a carry-on and a backpack is that you won't necessarily be able to purchase a lot of souvenirs or additional things to bring back home. Now, one of the things that we did to kind of get around that is we checked a bag on the way back home, and this allowed us to bring back a lot more items than we might have been able to do if we were simply doing the carry-on option. Now, I will mention right here, being a minimalist, I do recommend that you don't necessarily buy a ton of souvenirs to bring back to people. One of our favorite things to do when traveling is to bring back food items that are cultural food items that really represent the country that we were in, so that we can share that with other family members or friends. So you may consider doing the same. Obviously, you do have to be careful with refrigerated items, but if you're traveling with a pretty quick layover, then that is certainly an option.
Speaking of food, we are foodies, and we did budget about $50 a person a day, but ended up only spending about $25 per person per day because we had an intense schedule and not a lot of time to slow down to enjoy all the food that we anticipated. Most every European city had a fresh food market, and they are lovely places to visit. So I highly encourage you to go visit the food market and purchase some of the goodies. If you're someone who really likes to schedule out your itinerary, make sure to plan on scheduled food times. Be aware that Europeans have their own food schedule, especially in France. So it's important to try to fit into their schedule instead of the other way around. Remember that there is the option of purchasing food on the train, or you can even take your own picnic food on the train, as many Europeans do. Be adventurous when it comes to food. There are so many options, and it's part of the culture to try their particular foods. So do your research and try different things on the menu. Go to the food markets, go to the supermarkets, eat the street food, take a picnic with you. The food is so interesting, and there is such a variety there. Embrace the food because food is culture. And make sure to take croissants, chocolate, and cheese in your suitcase back home.
Bonjour, parlez-vous anglais? When you're in a foreign country, you really want to make sure that you learn just a few of the basic language sentences, such as hello, thank you, goodbye. A lot of times, especially in France, it's expected that you at least attempt to say something in their language before they will in turn respond to you in English. Though I have learned a portion of French and was practicing that before we went, I did not brush up on my Italian, which I had no previous knowledge of. So when we landed at the Fiumicino airport near Rome, I was really at a loss as to how to communicate with folks because the majority of them were speaking in Italian, not in English. So it was a really big culture shock to us for sure, and a little bit frustrating as their airports also did not have good signage, making it to where we were lost for about an hour. Remember that you are going to someone else's culture, so you need to have respect for them and also just the kindness to be able to try to speak their language to them instead of expecting them to just know English. Let's talk about safety with traveling. Now, something that we chose to do is travel in a twosome instead of as individuals. Not only is it more fun, but it really is more safe. Also, a few other things that we took as precautions for safety are the following. First of all, we made sure that we had splash-proof and RFID protected bags and backpacks. So technically she had the bag, I had the backpack, but hers was splash-proof as well as RFID, and then I have a tactical backpack that allowed me to have all of my camera equipment with me without being afraid that someone could potentially take away that tech through pickpocketing or slashing. If you don't have a splash-proof bag or tactical backpack, one of the things that you can do is reverse the backpack and wear it in front instead of on your back, because then it allows you to still use both arms just like you could if it was on your back, but it's a little bit more safe because it's on your front. You also want to be sure to stay aware of your surroundings. There are a lot of pickpockets and beggars in these big European cities, and sometimes in the medium-sized ones as well. Wherever there are tourists, there are going to be pickpockets. So always stay aware of your surroundings and just know there are certain places of cities that you just shouldn't go if you're trying to stay safe or if you have expensive things with you. Something else to take into consideration is how you use social media while you're traveling. I think a lot of times it's the popular thing to do to post on social media and put your little location beacon on there as well, just to show the world where you're at. But the problem is you're showing the world where you're at, and that can jeopardize your safety. So my recommendation would be do not post in real time where you are. For instance, if you're going to be visiting Paris and you're in Paris, don't necessarily post where you're at in Paris until you're leaving that city or you're in a different city if you feel like you have to post within a week of your being there. Or you can do what we chose to do and wait until we actually returned home before we ever posted about our trip. Another reason not to be on social media is just really embracing the moment, embracing the adventure, and turning off of social media for a time. Another travel tip when it comes to safety and communication is using an app called Signal. You can use this instead of texting someone or instead of using WhatsApp. Now, a lot of people over in Europe and in other countries do use WhatsApp, so you may be forced to get on there and use it for certain situations. But if you're communicating with friends or family back home, you may consider using Signal. Signal is double encrypted, so it's a lot harder to hack into it, whereas with other apps that are communication apps, they are not double encrypted. Another great thing about Signal is that you can use it to make video calls, so you can do some of the same things that you would on other apps, but in a safer way.
There are a few things that you might want to keep in mind, one being currency. It was suggested that we change our money ahead of time. That way it would be more economical. Plus, you may not be able to use a credit card in every single location, and you need to have a little bit of their money on hand. When it comes to tipping, each country seems to have its own practice. So I would suggest researching ahead of time, and if in doubt, watch what the locals are doing. Something we would have done differently is to take an unlocked phone and purchase a SIM card while there. When we went, we had a limited phone plan from our stateside carrier. We would have done this differently had we known how much we depended on data in order to help us navigate while there. So I would encourage you to take an unlocked phone and purchase a SIM card when you get on the ground. This probably will prove to be a less expensive option, and you probably will experience more signal coverage. This is in comparison to walking around trying to find a Wi-Fi source. Another thing to remember would be the restrooms, known as water closets in Europe. Sometimes you will need coins to pay for the water closets. Also, if you're going in somewhere, you'll need to purchase an item in order to use a water closet there.
Two more quick things that I wanted to mention as things that are good to know that we wish we would have known or done a little bit differently. The first one is in relation to those of you that are like me that love to have your camera out while you're traveling. There's a time to have your camera out and there's a time not to have your camera out for two different reasons. The first one is sometimes it's just not safe or convenient to have your camera out. If you're in the middle of a supermarket and there's lots of people around you or it's a tight aisle, it's just hard to have your camera out without it getting jostled out of your hands or potentially a pickpocket getting it. The second thing is sometimes it's good to just put away the camera and build those pictures in your mind instead of always capturing it with your camera. You'll remember more clearly what you did and what you saw if you try to not rely on your camera so much. So yes, capture those beautiful shots, whether it's footage or photos, but also know that you need to put it away sometimes and just exist in that different culture for a time.
This is the second thing that we would have done differently. Even though we went to see what we could see, we would have spent more time outside the city, just enjoying the culture and experiencing more of the food, instead of dashing from icon to icon.
The last thing that we want to share with you is perhaps the most important thing that we can possibly tell you, and that is start planning the trip. It took us years of talking about traveling to Europe or traveling to a foreign country for us to finally actually get the trip on the calendar. So our biggest advice would be start planning, save the money, do the research, and go. Because someday really is not a day of the week. And until you take that to heart, you're probably not going to take that trip and begin to be a traveler. Now, I understand there is some uncertainty with the times that we live in, but I would just encourage you to go ahead and start planning, but do your research. Find out what the country that you're going to is requiring in terms of guidelines and just different things that you should be in the know about. And then certainly get insurance because you never know what may happen, and it's just good to have that safety net underneath your travel plans. But in the long run, just remember that money returns, but time does not. So get out there, start planning that trip, and get ready for one big adventure. Do you have a general?
I'll wing it.
This is good, this is great, this is great. This is what I do every time, literally.
If you're traveling in, what?
You're starting?
Oh, sorry.
With a catastrophe.
With a catastrophe, the
not
end.
having...
just stop after catastrophe. What is my saying?
What is my saying? Is that all you would say?
Whatever she said. So consider looking in the reviews on Airbnb. Oh boy, my laughing partner here.
I cannot stop laughing. I never have this problem. I never laugh in front of the camera.
Oh.
Except like one time after I've said something 25 times. That's the only time that I laugh. Like otherwise it's not funny.
We stayed with a lot of superhosts because they seem to offer the best experience. Right, I have to have so many retakes.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, exactly. How many minutes? What platforms? This is not the list that you just told me.
Because we have to talk about food at some point in time. We're just now on number 2. Great. Okay, let's move on to carry-ons and backpacks.
Carry on. Speaking of food. Correct.
I think more safe. I think more safe. It's more safe.
Safer.
It's the same thing. Hey, retakes. Okay, so here is our celebratory manor snack, the last of its kind in our house right now, until we go back. It's actually fared pretty well. It's amazing what foil wrap can do. All right, ready?
I didn't like all of them, but I like this one.